Welcome to episode 31 of As Long as the River Flows, a Keepers of the Water podcast. In episode 31, we explore the Saskatchewan Waterwalk with Waasekom Niin. Waasekom Niin is Turtle Clan Anishinaabe from Saugeen First Nation and the Kettle and Stoney Point First Nations on the southeastern shores of Lake Huron. He is an avid paddler, having led 4 ceremonial canoe journeys through the Great Lakes to raise awareness about water, climate change, and Indigenous sovereign responsibilities. His journey began in response with the Waterwalks, where he has been a protector and eagle staff carrier on 7 walks. Waasekom is known for starting Picking Up the Bundles canoe journey, Gathering of Clans, the Great Lakes Petition, The Lake is Speaking to Us, and most recently, the Elegy of Ancestors.
Kanse, Bosho, Waasekom Nindam, Shigen Dodem, Saugeen Minmawo Yaksnang Donji. My name is Waasekom. I'm a helper and a paddler, and I also happen to have my companion here as well. I'm an eagle staff carrier on the Waterwalks, and I initially sort of started out kind of by accident, really, a number of years ago. I had meant to just go on the walk for a day and go through my father's home community, and after walking one day, I realized I need to keep walking, and that sort of led me on this month-long journey, and then that journey really just changed my whole outlook and my whole life at the time. And it was really in response to answering this question, where are the men? So the Waterwalks are a ceremonial endeavor led by women, as the women are the ones who are responsible for the water where we come from. And Josephine was this very brave and quiet, humble person that started this whole movement, really, after being asked this question, what are you going to do about the state of the water? And she started to work with other women and grandmothers to carry a copper vessel around Lake Superior in 2003. Over the next decade, she carried the water around all of the Great Lakes. She coordinated what they called the 4 Directions Waterwalk, which came from the Gulf of Mexico, the Atlantic Ocean, the Arctic Ocean, and the Pacific Ocean, all converging on Lake Superior in 2011. And so by the time I had met Josephine, we were just sitting down to dinner, and I remember when we first met, it just kind of felt like I was meeting an old friend somehow. And because I had been raised by various people that were sort of like the old school Anishinaabe, that were very generous and kind and quiet, but also very discerning. And so when I was finally able to go on one of the Waterwalks in 2015, it changed my whole life. And so now I always answer that whenever I'm called to come and help, I do that. And it's a great honor and great responsibility to have been adopted by the late Josephine Mandamin as her son, entrusted in part to carry on the legacy of this work. And so most recently, we went on the Saskatchewan River Waterwalk, where we walked from the headwaters at the Saskatchewan Glacier to Prince Albert in Saskatchewan. So I'm an Anishinaabe person and a visitor to Treaty 6. It was a really eye-opening experience, and that's a little bit of what I'm going to share with everybody. Yeah, and so I'm really grateful to be here, and thank you for asking me and presenting that protocol back in the summer, Jesse, to be a part of this gathering today. Just wanted to share a little bit more too as well. After the journey in 2015, we called it the Migration Waterwalk, and it was really in memory of this story as an Anishinaabe, how we came to be Great Lakes people long ago, and the path of our migration that we followed. So on that journey, I got to see for the really first time in my life, like the breadth of our nation. And, there's this idea of like the world is such a small place. And when we actually go out onto the land and onto the water, we realize what a big world it really actually is and how long it takes to actually around, and these courageous women who were out on the highways, out on the shorelines, like going to not only the really beautiful and sacred places, but also the places that are really hard to love, the places that have been damaged by industrialism to offer. And first and foremost, it's a ceremony, right? So the women carry this copper pail and they pray and sing for the water. And it seems like it's just a simple walk. And in some ways it is very simple, but it's also very full. And so like, if you can imagine being out on the land for like a month, right? And having to put aside your own humanity to make the sacrifice to not be there necessarily for your family and all the things that you're sort of dealing with as a person. You have to be able to hold that in a good way so that you can actually center the water in this work. And as a man, it's your job to walk alongside the women and to support them and to protect them and to make sure that the way is clear. And so it's this, and when they first brought together the ceremony, and first dreamed the ceremony, it was made in that way where it was of balance, and it was also in part to help restore some of those relationships that between men and women that through colonization have been forgotten. I have to say this in a really humble way that like the opportunity to be on these journeys and to learn what it means to be a nene, a man, alongside following women's leadership is probably the greatest honor of my life so far. I'm really grateful for that leadership of women. And I think that's really our rightful place in a lot of ways. If I could be so bold to say that first journey really just inspired me to pick up and answer and bring forward that work. And so it actually led me to getting back in the canoe. And that the canoe journeys, we've now completed 4 ceremonial canoe journeys, are an extension of the Waterwalks. And they're a way to be out on the water, to see the land as it's meant to be seen, to restore the Jimon, the canoe, into our lives. This eagle staff here actually accompanies me in the canoe. And each one of these feathers actually helps to tell the story of the different journeys that I've been on. And so I've earned those feathers through that sort of way of picking back up this bundle that as Anishinaabe over time, we sort of lost that ability to really be in connection with one another through our communities. Like we're all connected by water. And that's sort of what the late Josephine Mandamin used to always say was, we're all united by water. And that's so true. And I'm grateful for the last speaker who really was able to articulate a lot of sort of like what's really going on. And this most recent water walk was the 7th water walk that I've been a protector on. And it was by far the most challenging walk that I've been on. We were coming from the mountains at a time that BC was on fire, that the glaciers is very challenging to see the state of the mountains. Something about the mountains gives us strength, gives us a feeling of rest, a feeling of breath, like a fresh air, of freshness, of life. And the ecology and the state of those mountains, it's almost heartbreaking when you go to these glaciers and see them receding at an alarming rate. And the dryness of the mountains as well is something that when we first started out, it was very like abrupt. And at that particular time as well, there were bears that had come down from the mountains that were very, very hungry. There wasn't a lot of berries that year. And so like they were becoming reckless. And so we had to navigate on these roads and in these spaces and through very sacred places, really. And we saw like not only where we're at in terms of climate change, just like how much water and how much flow was coming from these glaciers, but also to see how the natural world was responding. I mean, it was very challenging in the beginning, even though it was also very beautiful. We knew in undertaking this journey that it would be difficult just because of the climate, right? And being in relationship with the Saskatchewan River meant to go to a lot of the places that were really hurting. And that's one thing that from here in the Great Lakes, well across, like I think it was Maud was saying about this illusion of abundance, is something that we very much felt that no matter where you go in Turtle Island now, like that sort of idea of pristine abundance is not true, and there's really no place that hasn't been touched. by colonialism, by capitalism. I want to be just really mindful that some of the things that I'll share about what I saw is not in any way a criticism of treaty anybody living in Treaty 6. I think because over here it's the same, where we find this level of degradation that's really alarming. And so I think that was the first time I actually got to witness oil and gas fields and seeing the river, how low it was, even because there's a dam system, the Bighorn Dam. And this year they had to release the dam because of how much water was coming out. We were on this walk during that time. And so we got to see how the river was really, really low. And it went very quickly from like Rocky Mountain House. It went from like glacial blue to like brown very, very quickly, and how low it was, and how like you could see how much detergents were like just always present. And it was very challenging the walk to because of how impaired the river is. So when you're in ceremony and you're in relationship with the water and with the land, you feel all of that, right? And it's sort of like the role of the women to hold that and to know what to sort of do with that, the energy that and the feelings that they pick up along the way. And so one of the most beautiful things about the walk was just how generous and how generous and caring the people were that we met, like the Niwiijiiwok people that we met along the way. And so we were really well taken care of through like Musqueam and through Edmonton while we were sort of navigating a lot of those really big feelings. And that translates on these walks to like the challenges that you face also become like a mirror, so that we ended up having to deal with a lot of internal conflicts actually. And it was something that, we had to use our best counsel as like protectors, as people that have been doing this for a number of years, to like know what to do. And we had to rely a lot on ceremony to help us through the challenging landscape, but also like the energy of what the water must feel like every day. So this journey was 36 days long, and we walked over 1,100 kilometers, and every day was literally a challenge. And one of the biggest lessons that I can share from being a visitor on Treaty 6 territory, going into Saskatchewan, into the prairies, we had to put together our best counsel, our best teachings and understandings of how to be good relatives to one another, to be good visitors. And the biggest lesson that I learned from this journey was about our medicine together is stronger. That whenever we sort of set out to do work, to respond to our responsibilities as Indigenous people, there's so much that can happen that would call into question our intentions, would challenge us, right? And it's sort of recognizing that everybody who is meant to be there has a gift, has a strength, has a medicine that they've been carrying, that they've been working on, that is so vital. And so every single person on this walk brought something forward that was truly needed. And it was the answer to sort of the challenges that we faced, was like leaning in and relying on our relatives to bring that strength forward, to bring that medicine, to bring that gift. And it was really that teaching of our putting our medicine together that helped us complete the walk in Prince Albert, where the North and South Saskatchewan River meet. And it was by far the most challenging water walk that I've been on. Mostly because it was very far from my own home. But I also learned a great deal about how, historically through this story of colonization, like here in the East, we were sort of hit first, and even further east, the Mi'kmaq and the Wabanaki people were the first, like sort of taking that first brunt of colonization. And as it moved west, a lot of our sacred bundles and our teachings and our ceremonies actually ended up in Treaty 6 territory. And over the years, like back in the 60s and 70s, a lot of elders went to like Peter O'Cheese and various different elders to retrieve those teachings. And so there's this really beautiful connection. And it reminds me of that teaching of Josephine about the water is what unites us and what connects us, that really helped us to remember that there's these beautiful internation connections, and there's all these strengths that we have as Indigenous people that like we can draw upon. there's a memory there. And it's through the water that we are also able to remember and retrieve, the knowledge that really belongs to us. And so as these walks are a form of relationship, the canoe journeys are a form of building those relationships with the water so that we feel what the water must feel every single day. And it's being in that kind of relationship that we come to understand what it is that we must do. So it's a form of inquiry, really. And so they're like, for me, it's like a first step or a good step in the right direction as to informing the work. So I'm not just someone that does these walks or just like, or talks, or, it's like there's from these journeys emerge instruction. And we're sort of like, as we petition the water and creation for answers, it's like a relationship. So the water and the land petitions us in return. And then we have to sort of figure out what to do with that. And so that's primarily what I do every day of my life. From each one of the canoe journeys that I've been on, from each one of the water walks that I've been on, is sort of finding ways to answer, what happens when creation petitions us in return. And I think we're seeing that a lot, especially through climate change and what's happening right now in this country or Turtle Island. Like we are being petitioned, we are being spoken to. A lot of the prayers that have been spoken from a long time ago, like it takes time for certain things to come to manifest, right? And a lot of the old prayers are being answered today. And the prayers that we are putting out today are being heard and they're being responded to. And that gives me a great deal of instruction and direction. And that's the best sort of encouragement that I have because of the state of desecration to Turtle Island. The best thing we can hope for right now is direction, like clear direction as to what we have to do in these critical and sacred times. And that's what I have to share today. And so I want to say thank you, hi, for listening to me.
That was Waasekom Niin. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to find out more about Keepers of the Water or donate to the cause, make sure you check out our website at keepersofthewater.ca. And if you'd like to keep up to date with everything on our socials, like our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast to be the very first to receive new episodes every week. Magwitch.